Hello, everyone, and welcome to another Paperless Lunch and Learn session. My name is Rick Reith. I'm a manufacturing solution expert for ISE and Paperless. I'll be your presenter today. Just a couple of things to kind of indicate today. We're going to do a couple poll questions during the presentation. Very simple questions. Should take no longer than 10 seconds per question. The responses are usually just yes or no. When you answer those poll questions, when you click your response, it automatically takes it. There's not another step to take that says save or submit or anything like that. So if you do not get any feedback, no worries. Just make sure you click one of the responses and the information will be recorded automatically. Also, if you have any questions that you would like to get answered, please submit those through the question tab or the chat tab, and we'll review those at the end of the presentation. All right, today's web or lunch and learn session is going to be talking about 8 ways paperless MES can help eliminate or reduce waste out there on your shop floor. If you're thinking about waste, right? It's something, if you eliminate it or reduce it, it can directly affect your bottom line in a positive way. And it's also one of the easiest things that you can kind of point your gun or target at to say that I want to have a continuous improvement objective that is going to eliminate waste, because you're thinking about feedback and getting good value for your investment or an ROI. Waste is probably the #1 thing that most manufacturers focus on because of that immediate feedback or the immediate benefit that I just talked about. Looking at waste, right? And I think 8 ways to eliminate it. You're thinking about lean, right? Lean actually describes 8 different types of waste in manufacturing, and those different wastes are extra processing, transportation, overproduction, waiting for work, inventory, motion, non-utilized talent, and then lastly, defects. You're thinking about these different lean manufacturing waste, they're overlapping it many times. You know, you think about things like excess processing. You know, an example of excess processing is lack of communication, meaning what should I work on, what order, or what's the drawing, or what are the special instructions, how many pieces to make, whether that's just between planners and the shop floor or supervisors in the shop floor, or if that's between first and second shift, etc. There's a lot of information that needs to be communicated on the floor, and extra processing to make sure you manage that correctly so that people know what they're working on at the right time is important. Well, that's also kind of overlapping with motion, right? You have to take extra steps in order to print maybe some paper out or communicate what you want to be worked on, what's the highest priority, etc. There's other things in here like defects. It's a pretty popular one to focus on. Lack of proper documentation can actually cause defects. You can have a design change, or there's no quality control checkpoints or checklists at a specific part in the manufacturing process, or there's no quality checks for the material that you're receiving in, or there is quality checks for material received in, just not on every piece of material or on key pieces of material. Overproduction, another example of where components are maybe produced before they're used, or maybe you buy too many pieces than you want. Again, that's kind of where inventory is overlapping with production and motion and extra processing. So these things really do overlap a lot. And you know, one area out there on your shop floor could actually accommodate or address multiple lean initiatives for reducing or eliminating waste. So I kind of boiled this down and said, all right, where does paperless play into this world here? And where can paperless play into the world to help you eliminate waste? Because again, these things are overlapping. So I kind of boiled it down into different things out there on the floor. One is job communication. Another one is inventory communication. Then we have work center communication, or facility or cell or area out there on your manufacturing floor, whichever term you use to designate those specific areas, or even machine. Defects. Then we have job reporting, attendance reporting, inventory reporting, and lastly, minimizing steps. So these are really 8 things that we're going to focus on, which kind of, again, overlaps between many of the different areas defined in your lean manufacturing waste categories. So these are the top things we're going to focus on, and let's take the first one here, job communication. And building this out here, you've got different things you want to communicate. Maybe down to the operator level, you want to communicate what to work on, when to work on it, what's the highest priority, etc. You also have it from a supervisor's perspective to say, what is currently being worked on? What is my priority list? How far along have they completed the job? And then you have it maybe from a management, whether that's in the office or on the shop floor, where you can say, I want to see what's expected versus what's actual, and maybe also what is scrapped. There's a lot of different waste that can be done or eliminated in the communication process. You know, we can communicate to the floor what they should be working on, the important paperwork or information that they need to support what they're actually working on is all important to minimizing or lowering that waste. Things that are behind schedule, etc. I'm going to toggle over to live application now throughout this PowerPoint. So if you see me switch screens, it's because I'm going to bring up the actual paperless application and look at it from the different perspectives that I just kind of outlined. So from a operator's perspective, you know, I may want to be communicated, what should I be working on today? You know, one of the things within waste is producing things at the wrong time, right? So from a standpoint of a dispatch list and what is the hot priority, I want to communicate that out to the shop floor. Maybe I want to communicate what information they need to actually use in order to manufacture something. So from a shop package standpoint, I have the ability to put in test instructions. Test instructions can come in a lot of different formats, where a test instruction could be, or excuse me, an attachment could be a test instruction, it could be a setup instruction, it could be how to assemble something. There's a lot of different ways you can communicate. The important thing here to remember is that all this information is current, real-time, and accurate. And that's the important thing about eliminating waste. You're not looking at a document here that is out of date. This could be the document that was just literally maintained 1 minute ago, and now out on the floor, the operator is seeing the changes that were made inside of that document. So it's really important, again, eliminating waste is part of that is the communication. And if you're working on the right document, obviously you're going to manufacture the right part in the right manner, reducing or eliminating your defects. And again, you can see how all of these things kind of play together and overlap, right? So we've got it from an operator's perspective here, and I see documents. You can even look at drawings out there, and again, latest drawing, the most accurate drawing is out there. And then we can also, you know, even show videos out there as far as how to maybe assemble something, or how to set up a machine, or how to perform a testing process, etc. There's a lot of different things you can do in the shop packet inside of Paperless that will help you improve that job communication. Again, that's just one part of it. That's the part where we're saying that, you know what, I'm going to communicate to the person on the floor, you know, what to work on, which is, you know, from my dispatch list perspective. And then I'm also going to communicate what do they need, or what supporting information do they need in order to produce the item in the most efficient manner, so that I don't have defects, and I'm completing it based on expected rates, etc. Then we can kind of, you know, toggle over and look at maybe a supervisor's perspective and say, well, I want to look at my sequencer, and I'm going to say, all right, here's my sequencer, and I have jobs out there for a given work center. I can see all my work centers out there as well. I can see how much time is remaining for each of the job that's identified in my work center. I can drag and drop these. I can prioritize them in different ways. So you can do a lot of things from a supervisor's perspective in order to say what's running, when is it running, etc. You can also go and say, well, maybe I want to work with crews, and looking at a crew, I can see the individuals on the crew and also what jobs they have started. Again, that's the job communication. It's not only what needs to be worked on, but also what is being worked on. Is it the right job or not the right job? And then from a maybe more of a management level, or if you want to push this out to the shop floor to have a kind of a self-managing tool that says, what's my expected quantity versus actual quantity, you could have a dashboard out there that is showing that to the individuals to say, here, you're ahead of schedule or you're behind schedule for that specific job. Again, communicating the right information at the right time. One thing I kind of glanced over a little bit was their ability to dictate what job should be worked on first, second, third, and fourth. And I said priority, which you can do priorities, but you can also specify that they have to work on the first job before they work on the second job. Again, think about back to those lean forms of waste, right? Overproducing, defects, things like that. If I'm overproducing, I may be working on the wrong job at the wrong time. The next thing we're going to go into is inventory communication. Again, this was at the operator level where you can actually see what you need to use from a component standpoint to manufacture this end item. You can also look at it from a supervisor standpoint to say that, hey, these are the components that are available. You can actually dictate the sequence and as far as what material is used first, second, third, fourth. You also have a management kind of standpoint to say, I'm going to be a material manager and look at my Kanban board to see what material is available versus what material is actually used. From a quick glance, I can see I'm okay with material 1100, but I'm actually down or low on inventory for item 1000. And again, there's a lot of different things in there, and the most important thing to remember is that the information that you're seeing here is current and accurate. Nobody has to print this out. It's accurate information so that everybody is reacting to the same stuff at the same time. Toggling back over to the application, from an operator's perspective, I can see from a shop packet perspective, what's my bill of material? And I can see here specifically the entire bill of material, or more granular, I can look at the items or the components that are deemed to be used at this operation step. And I can see I have two components here that are set to be used at this operation. So those are the two components I maybe need to grab, or I need to make sure that they're over my work area. I can further drill into them, to say, all right, where are they located? How many on hand do I have? I think about motion, right? Obviously, that's one of those lean waste categories. Well, if I'm going around my warehouse or manufacturing facility looking for inventory, that's wasted steps, wasted motion, right? Here's, I can immediately see how many pieces I have on hand at each and every location out there. And if you had batch lot control, that would be in here as well. So you can actually go to the correct location for that inventory. Now, this could be the operator on the floor, or this could also be a material handler that says, I'm picking material for a certain job and I want to see where that material resides in my warehouse. I know I need to pick 100 pieces, so I need to find a location that satisfies that 100 pieces. That's if you're picking that way. If you're picking in a FIFO sequence, obviously you want to use the oldest material first, which Paperless can dictate that as well. But again, you're presenting that information in an easy format to employees on the floor, whether it's the employee at the work center manufacturing the item, or it's the material handler, water spider, somebody moving around, it does not matter. Then we can actually go over from a supervisor's perspective and say, what's my inventory balance information? And I can look at it at a glance here and say, here's all the components out there for my facility. I can actually use the sequencer column here and actually sequence the items in what order they should be used. You can also look at my manufacturing order info, and I can drill into these to say, for this order, I can look at my bill of material and I can see what components are actually indicated to be used. I can further drill into those as well to look at how many are required versus how many are on hand versus how many are available. So there's a lot of information inside of Paperless that can, again, help minimize those steps. The next thing we're going to look at is work center communication, which is, again, down to the operator level or the supervisor's level and manager's level, etc. But there's different levels here where I want to communicate information to and from the shop floor. You think about things like what's running. Is it running ahead? Is it running behind? What's my, do I have any downtime for any work centers out there? What's expected versus what's actual? And again, everything is current and accurate. So coming back to the application, let's just look at it from a work center standpoint. And I'm just going to go back, and if I'm an operator, again, I can see here what's running at any given time. I can see if I'm ahead or behind based on my rates on the top of the screen there. I can look at my statuses, whether I'm ahead or behind, red or green, which is all great. You can also look at it from a standpoint of, from a supervisor, where I was before, my percent complete. What is my percent complete for each of the jobs out there? From a work center standpoint, I can see that I have certain machines that are down. This one's been down for 2 hours and 43 minutes. I have another one that's been down for 2 hours and 41 minutes. So you can see what work centers are available, what work centers are not available. That also was displayed on my supervisor screen. From a standpoint of the sequencer, I could easily see here these caution signs indicate that those machines are down, and I can hover over the top of it, and it says the first machine is down because of a conveyor belt issue. Again, you're getting that real-time feedback for what's being run on that machine, what is actually going well, what's going poorly. And then you can look at it again from a dashboard, and I had my dashboard out here display my downtime to say that I've got 2 machines that are down, and this could be broadcasted above the work center or anywhere. But again, you're getting that immediate feedback, so you're eliminating wasted steps to say, what's going well on the floor, but more importantly, what's going awry or what's going poorly on the floor. And one thing to note here is that from this communication standpoint, there's kind of a two-way communication. You're pushing or presenting information out to the shop floor, to the operators and supervisors, etc. And then you're also getting information back. So you're actually pushing information to management from the shop floor. So that communication stream is both ways. It's 2 ways. And some examples of the 2-way communication is the dashboard, but another example is maybe an alert or notification that was automatically created from a downtime event that was started out there on the shop floor. Maybe that alert or notification went out to my maintenance department, or maybe it went to the supervisor that's responsible for that area out there on the shop floor. The next one we're going to talk about is defects. And defects can come in a lot of different formats, right? 2 big categories are purchased and manufacturing, where I've got purchase order defects and manufacturing order defects. Again, this is all current and accurate information. And you can specify where you want to turn on a quality checklist, right? I want to find defects as early in the process as possible. Again, overlapping a lot of different categories for the 8 forms of waste and lean manufacturing, where you're wasting steps in motion, you're actually having excess production or over processing because I have to do rework, or I have to buy more parts, or I have to make or manufacture or release an order to manufacture more parts because my yield is not 100%. It's at maybe 60, 70, 80%. So a lot of things can be taken away by understanding where my defects reside and finding those as early in the process as possible. Ways you can do that, again, purchasing and manufacturing, not going to go into each and every one of these, but if I am in the manufacturing process out there and I have tests associated, those tests can be kicked off automatically when you're reporting pieces, or I can manually do that if I have a quality inspector out there and I'm going to test something. I can say, well, I've got 2 pieces in front of me to test. Hit my start testing, and I'm now actually walking through my test plan. And again, the earlier you find the issue, the better off you are. So if I had a failure for that visual inspection and it says, tell me what failed, and say there was a scratch on it, I immediately just created a non-conformance report, as you see on my screen there by the little red tag that's indicated. And more importantly, that was also communicated via maybe an alert or notification message to someone saying there is a non-conforming situation on the floor. Again, looking at that information, but even more important, what about stopping the defects before they're even created, right? So in the case of my variable test here, I actually put in a chart that's going to show up after I enter a value in, and you'll notice that I have a value where I can see my my specification limits, my upper and lower ones, and obviously if I get to those red lines, I'm in jeopardy of having a non-conformance kick off, which obviously is going to have a lot of, it's going to be a defect, of course, but it's going to cause a lot of wasted step, right? And where motion and overproduction and overprocessing and everything else will have to kick in to correct that non-conforming situation. So why not show something to the operator ahead of time, saying, you know what, you're getting close to those red lines. You may want to adjust your manufacturing process, or maybe you have parts that are not working well, so you need to adjust the material that you're putting into the parts. A lot of different reasons that you guys know better than myself for what could potentially happen on the floor and what could potentially be corrected by the operator on the floor, avoiding that defect scenario that we just talked about. Defects can be created in many different formats, where you can actually have manufacturing order ones, purchase order ones, open test categories. So there's a lot of different defects that can be reported. And maybe the open category, I haven't really talked about that yet, but maybe that is something where you're doing preventive maintenance, or you're doing quality testing on your machine or your die or your tool, and you're running that test plan against that piece of equipment, if you will, and seeing if it's still within its tolerances and it can still be used, or does it need to be, shipped back to the machine department to get it reworked, or do I need to buy another one? There's a lot of different reasons there. But the most important thing here is that you can create a lot of different control plans or quality check plans that can be kicked off at many different parts or points within your manufacturing process. For purchased items, for manufactured items, for maybe machine testing or tool testing or gauge testing, or assembly processes. It does not matter. It's pretty much unlimited there. So this first part right now, I've talked pretty much about the communicating and pushing things out to the floor, as well as communicating back from the floor. I'm going to launch a couple of poll questions here right now. And again, they should probably take no more than 10 seconds for you guys to answer. And let me just launch the first one. And the first question I'm launching is, do you guys currently use paper to communicate job information on the floor? And that could be anything. That could be a drawing, that could be test instructions, setup instructions, that could be the actual job that you're supposed to work on today. And that's not a bad thing. I mean, sometimes you still do need some paper out there on the floor to indicate, what the job is, and it maybe goes from, machine to machine. But there's other things that maybe could be replaced, through paperless, that allows you to eliminate that extra step of managing the paper, the cost of managing that paper, etc. All right, I'm going to close that one. And the next question I'm going to send out there is, do you record work center downtime right now? And how do you do that? I mean, do you do that electronically? Is that through paper? Oops, sorry, it wasn't launched. Is that through paper? How do you do downtime data? Is it through a separate system? Usually everybody I've talked to these days does record downtime in some fashion. And you think about waiting, right, as one of the 8 forms of lean waste. Well, that's one thing I'm waiting for, is I'm waiting for that machine to be fixed, or maybe that machine is down because I'm waiting for material to be delivered to it. It could be the work in process material. It could be components that I need to manufacture at my step of the manufacturing process, or at my cell. Okay, next question I'm going to submit is, how do you communicate defects today? Do you communicate those through a paper method? Do you do them verbally? Is it an electronic application that you have in place? Defects are important. I mean, if you had to kind of hone in on one area, like I said, when I kick this presentation off, waste is an obvious thing to attack, right? While inside of the waste that we're talking about today, defects is an obvious way to track, or excuse me, to focus on and really get some immediate benefits and paybacks from your efforts. All right, I'm going to close that one, and I'm going to continue back with the presentation. The next thing we're going to talk about is now the reporting aspect of this, right? And up to this point, like I said, we've been talking about communicating to the floor, but what about reporting, and how does somebody report things? And you think about, over processing or extra steps or motion and things like that. Reporting, you want to make sure that everything is done in a very simplistic, intuitive, and easy manner for statuses, obviously labor, quantity, etc. We've always had two golden rules inside of Paperless. One is to keep it simple and minimize the amount of keystrokes that an operator has to take. Again, that's one form of waste. If I have to click 7 different buttons in order to record something, that's wasted steps. So just like you guys are probably applying lean initiatives in your manufacturing of your end items, we've always been applying those and will continue to apply those in the manufacturing of our software, where we will always want to minimize the number of steps and pages that are presented in order to record events out there on the shop floor. So taking a look at that, from a reporting standpoint, status and labor, right? I mean, some of the easiest things to report. I'm just going to say continue and stop my testing that I had open before, and go back to a work center. And if I want to start reporting something, I want to make it simple. I select a job and select the action. So in this case, I selected run. I'm now running that job. If I want to actually report, I just reported statuses and labor, but if I also want to record pieces, I can hit record pieces, or I can also hit stop, and I'm going to record both pieces and statuses. And if you notice here, it's also going to record production receipt, but we'll just hit enter on that. So I've now basically done the recording of information. Status, labor, quantities, all can be reported against a job very easily and seamlessly. I'll get into minimizing keystrokes even further down in this presentation. The next thing is attendance reporting. Straightforward, simple application where you're looking at a time clock out there on the floor. And then this is okay, and some customers use it. Some customers choose to use their payroll provider attendance system like ADP or Paychex or Ceridian. But there's waste maybe behind the scenes of making sure that, I know somebody is in for the day, but my supervisor doesn't know. ADP knows, or Paychex knows, or Kronos knows that, but my shop floor system doesn't know somebody has arrived. And there's different ways inside of Paperless where you can make that seamless, where you can record attendance inside of Paperless and broadcast that information to other applications like ADP or Paychex, so that your payroll processing is done and accurate and okay, but your shop floor is also up to date, and you know who's here, when they've got here, what they're working on and what they're not working on. Then we get into inventory reporting, where you can say that I have the consumption, we have receipts, we have also scrap, and there's a lot of other things that you can do from a standpoint of issuing, consumptions, etc., from an inventory standpoint. A lot of different ways in Paperless, but again, keeping the keystrokes minimized, making the process very simple to actually perform, and then you get all the immediate feedbacks and information up front. So wasted steps of the process here for issuing material, and it could be part of the MO process, it could be outside the MO process. And what I mean by that is that it could be part of the manufacturing process, so that when I am working on a job here and I say record pieces, it is going to say I'm going to issue components at the same time, or backflush those two pieces. So it's part of the manufacturing process itself. But it also could be outside of it, meaning that I could have this be outside of the application where I'm showing you right now, where you have the issue material as a separate application, where a material handler maybe does it, Again, different ways for different areas and different manufacturers out there to do these transactions. It also could be anything, scrap, receipts, etc. But also there's another method that we didn't talk about, which is an automated method, where if I'm doing Kanban types of transactions and I want to consume the inventory for the item that was in that Kanban container, when I do an empty container or scan the empty bin, we can send those transactions directly to your ERP system that says this component was just consumed, or we just did an issue of this component for this many pieces, etc. That's automated behind the scenes to the operator on the floor. They're only pressing the empty or full bin transactions, and those inventory updates are happening automatically behind the scenes. So again, a lot of ways to minimize things. And speaking of minimizing steps, we minimize steps through the entire application, where we can do backflushing, or we can do like attendance and labor at the same time. Again, shorting the steps that happen. I just showed you the labor and material issue. We can do receipt and label, or you can do a lot of different combinations of all of the above. Where you can have 3 clicks create 7 business events. And here are the different business events that can get kicked off. If I have 3 clicks where I've selected the job, I've entered a quantity and pressed the enter button, I could have recorded labor, quantity, the status update, the material that was consumed during that manufacturing process. I could have reported finished goods to inventory at the same time. I could have created labels, and then I also could have generated some notifications for how well we were doing or how poorly we were doing. If you wanted to turn on quality, you could kick off the quality process at this time. Obviously, would be a couple more clicks to enter in the results of the test plan that was being presented to you. But this is just a good example that you can click the screen 3 times and actually create 7 events and update 7 different business applications. And then multiple departments can get the feedback from these minimized steps or the information that you're reporting. You're thinking about your BI, your accounting, purchasing, planning, production control. Everybody is getting the information directly and immediately from the shop floor, and then they can make better business decisions. Do I need to purchase something? We talked about inventory as one of the 8 forms of waste, right? If I'm buying more parts than what I need, or I'm buying them earlier than what I need, that is a wasted step, right? And so if you have accurate and up-to-date information for what was consumed and what was produced, etc., your purchasing and buying can be improved, just like your planning and scheduling and forecasting can be improved. I'm going to submit another poll question to everybody, and then if you guys want, you can enter in any questions in the chat box or the question box, and I'll answer those as well. So the last poll question, or 2 last poll questions, is how do you record information on the shop floor today, whether it's paper-based, electronic system, or do you use a combination of both? And again, that's not just for job reporting. That could be quality reporting. That could be inventory movements or purchase order receipts. I'll give that a couple more seconds for people to answer. And just to kind of give you some feedback, I'm seeing that we have probably 50% of everybody. 50% of you are using both a combination of paper and electronic systems. Some are 100% paper-based, and then others are using just electronic systems. Good response, thank you. And then the last poll question is, do you want somebody to follow up with you? And I'll just launch that right now, and I'm going to go look to see if there's any questions or comments in the chat box. I do not see any questions out there, either in the questions or the chat box.
Hey, Rick, just a thought about that feedback on 50% electronic and 50% paper-based. So one comment first is, this is Tony Fleischman with ISE, by the way, but we generally see that as a journey for our paperless customers. They often start with, either old electronic systems or completely paper-based, some type of a job packet or spreadsheet or something that tells people what to do. And they start migrating to electronic versions of that. Rick, do you have any thoughts if that 50% is probably an accurate number of what we'd see in our customer base as well? Any thoughts one way or another on that?
Yeah, I think so. Like I said, I think every customer that I've gone out to, or even prospect that I've gone out to, has some form of paper out there on the shop floor. Then obviously they're trying to minimize or get rid of that or find solutions to not need that anymore. Again, sometimes there's definitely necessity for paper. You think about a D-size drawing and trying to have that be visible on a PC or a tablet or something like that is pretty difficult. And plus you need a dedicated device for that as well, right? So there's cases where it makes sense to have a piece of paper still reside out there on the shop floor.
Good input. Yeah, I think it's the other thing that's helping people to get electronic is the fact that we have so many types of devices. I mean, in the old days, it was a old 5250 green screen. Well, now it's the nice thin client that you're seeing here in front of you can be run on virtually any kind of device as long as you can get meaningful information to that device on the screen size. But mobile devices, handheld devices, all the way up to big screens that are projecting that information. The other thing that I think is probably real obvious underneath the covers here is that everything's in real time. So that focus on eliminating waste and that focus on communication, it's all about true real-time information. Not only do we eliminate that paper that literally is as good as the time it was printed, but can go out of date quickly. But then that communication of here's a hot order, here's something that's down, notifications, visual impact that says here's green, red, yellow, exclamation points, you name it. But all that types of communication really streamlines that capability to keep people readily aware, whether that's on the floor, supervisor in an office, or back at the main office as well.
Right. There are some questions out there, so I'm going to read them off. First one is, when putting attachments into the shop packets, will this slow down the computer system or take up additional disk space on our current server? I would say no to the first one as far as slowing things down. As you guys can kind of realize that everything is a browser-based application, so it's very, very thin client out there. Will it take up additional disk space on your server? That depends on if you store things today or if you're looking to store new things into the future. And my example there is like an engineering drawing, right? That's probably stored someplace on a server today. So will it take up additional space? Absolutely not, because we can go and grab it from that server. If you're looking to say, all right, I want to put work instructions out on my server, which are paper form today, obviously it will take up some additional space. But you think about PDFs, they have a very small footprint compared to big PowerPoints or other applications. Let me look at the next question. From the inventory level of the BOM, can an operator add an item when they use a substitute item instead of what is on the BOM? Yes, absolutely. Probably glanced over, I didn't even glance over it, but I didn't show it, but it was on the screen. When you're looking at the BOM, there is an ability for adding an item or adding a component there, which will create the unplanned issue kind of scenario inside of your ERP system. So you can definitely add a component to that list. It's obviously temporary for that manufacturer. It does not change the product structure. So the next time you release an order for that item, that substitute component would not show up. Good question. Okay, there was some static. I apologize for that. Thank you for the good feedback. There's some audio static. we've been told that a clock number has to be entered prior to each report pieces. Your example did not demonstrate this. Is this a necessary step? Great question there. Yeah, in my example there inside of the new MES application, what I configured for that work center I was playing with is I configured it to use my logged in credentials. So I logged in as my operator, which was Rick Wright. So kind of think of a person out there that has a dedicated device to them. So it did not force me or require me to enter in a badge number. The badge number was automatically taken based on who logged into that device. So it used that for all of my transactions. What percentage of our customers use job off only? Another good question, and that kind of makes my mind spin into a little different area. I don't know the exact percentage of our customers. I would probably say that it's 30% of our customers use job off only, but that could have changed. After the implementation and they're up and running, they can definitely change their business practices, right? And that's where my mind begins to spin, is saying, if you want to eliminate steps, right? Rather than starting a job and stopping a job, you can just do job off only. And inside of Paperless MES, if you don't even care about the job off transaction or the labor transaction, you can just do record pieces and change statuses of jobs. So you don't even have to do the start and stop. Under the covers, we'll take care of the necessary transactions so that ERP is updated accurately. But it also kind of gets me into a separate area where it says like, maybe I want to start out and use paperless, or maybe I want to start recording when I stop to get a more actual and accurate number for how long it takes me to manufacture a certain step. And once I get that number, I can adjust my standard rates, etc., and then I can just perform job off onlys. It's kind of your choice there. And the nice thing is you can mix and match. I can turn on job off only today. I could turn on both job on and job off. I could say that I just want to record pieces and change statuses without performing the job on and job off transaction. And you can mix and match those based on different work areas. So maybe like your paint line, you don't really care about them actually starting and stopping work. So all they care about is reporting pieces and statuses.
Let's go into that a little deeper, Rick. So when we get questions about job off only and just reporting piece counts, it really leads us into the labor discussion of how important is it for you to collect labor specific to that job. And Rick kind of mentioned there, like a paint line, maybe we need to collect labor, maybe we don't. In some cases, people have asked us for make my reporting be as absolutely as simple as possible and give me what we might call as good enough labor calculations. Job off only fits that description. So in job off only, no one, as it implies, no one ever actually jobs onto the job. We make assumptions. So if somebody jobs off of something at 11 o'clock in the morning, we will assume that they've been working on that job since they started in the morning, maybe at 7 o'clock, 6:30, whatever. And it simply backs into the amount of hours and says this is the amount of hours that we have against this job. If they then job off of something again at 3, it will look and say, okay, we're going to assume you've been working on that since 11. That's okay. It eliminates some of the activity at the screen, but it gets to be relatively nebulous as to were they really working on it for that long. And secondly, we don't have real-time information about what they're doing while they're doing it. We only get information when they job off about how much they did, etc. So that's really where job off only came in. We see some companies start with job off only and then determine that they actually need more, more information. So the full capabilities there would be to job on and job off. And we really work to streamline those efforts so that you can do things like crewing on, crewing off, and trying to streamline that so people are not spending time at the terminal. And the reasons that people look at that is A, I don't want to be spending too much time at the terminal, and B, terminals can be viewed as expensive if I'm looking at, I've got to buy a PC, I've got to get a license of Paperless for that, and can I minimize my expenses there? So there's a lot to talk about there. Often it starts with how important is the labor to begin with and getting that labor information.
Another question about I mentioned labels could be generated, and the question is whether that was a WIP label or a finished part number label. It could be both. You can create a work in process label for the component that would, excuse me, for the step that was just manufactured, so kind of a move ticket scenario, so you know what the item is, what step through the manufacturing was created. You can also create a finished part label as well, which is for the receipt of the end item to stock, you know, and you want to put a label on it. You can obviously print that out as well. You can do both. You know, one of the things that, you know, we're talking about, you know, eliminating waste here. And, you know, one of the biggest things that, you know, we're talking about is obviously the comparison between a paper and electronic system. And I did mention there's definitely some cases for paper to still be out there on the shop floor, but there's also cases for it not to be on the floor, because that's one of the biggest wasted steps, right? Is I have to print it out, I have to distribute it, someone has to record on it, and then somebody has to take that information and enter it back into some application. So you've got wasted steps in the front end and the back end of that process. And then there's obviously, you know, potential waste in the middle there for motion and everything else. Hopefully you guys enjoyed the webinar. Thank you very much again for your time. I know I've gone over by about 15 minutes here. If you have any additional questions, feel free to reach out to myself or anybody at Paperless. Thanks again and have a great day.